So, in May this year, I was lucky enough to travel to Hamburg to work with the colleagues that Tanya mentioned, to speak about how Germany has remembered World War I and how this remembrance can be seen through games. As I stood presenting to a room full of German students and historians, I realised two things. Firstly, I really should have learnt German. I still know nothing. But also that despite the language and cultural barrier, our attitudes towards gaming really weren't that dissimilar. The same emotions and experiences I was having while playing these games were articulated within that group in almost the same way. I find myself fascinated by this idea that I, as well as others, can become so emotionally invested in what is essentially just pixels on a screen. This point was further driven home just last weekend when I attended the Australian Penny Arcade Expo in Melbourne. PAX Oz, as well as the 3 American PAX events, draw thousands of attendees, have close to 1,000 panel discussions each, and hundreds of exhibitors each year, and focus primarily, though not exclusively, on video games. Rather topically, Ubisoft held a big presence promoting Assassin's Creed Origins, which was coincidentally released on the first day of the convention. So in both cases, it became obvious to me that games offer a universalizing experience and ultimately promote not only consumption, but also critical discussion. So, there's no doubt that this phenomenon is incredibly powerful, and it left me wondering something. Would it be useful to bring this powerful emotional experience to a study of history? Would this allow the general public, those not versed in academic scholarship, to understand the work of my academic world? And furthermore, is this a phenomenon which already exists and which I can research? And in varying degrees, the answers to my questions were yes. For me, video games and gaming in general hold this really powerful potential as a form of public history, as a way to inform non-academic audiences about history and promote discussion and understanding of past events through, as Ron discussed, the giving of agency and also the creation of empathy by the player for the historical actors presented. And indeed, the general theme to my research focuses on this. So, as a historian, why would I study games? For me, the point of difference between games and other forms of public history is that implicit, empathetic connection many games are designed to invoke. As one of my colleagues put it, video games give participant-based narratives that you really don't find anywhere else. That is to say that games are inherently a medium which places the player at the centre of the story, and then the story unfolds in a manner which means that one cannot escape the emotions and themes being presented. So at first glance, I can completely understand that video games and history sit at complete opposite ends of the spectrum. So on one hand, you do have this modern, vibrant, interpretive, rather extreme, often controversial form. And on the other hand, you have an academic tradition quite steeped in fact and the archive, and sometimes largely disassociated from emotion. Having said that, academic history isn't for everyone. If it was, everyone would be training to be historians. But there's no doubt that history is an important thing for people to understand. And for the average person to try and gain this understanding, you can't simply hand them a textbook and expect them to read it. That's not how I like to learn either, to be honest. Part of my passion for this research comes from the idea that I think history should be for the public and shouldn't be the realm of a select few. Especially when developments like virtual reality become more and more common and accessible, it's important to understand that significant work can be undertaken to utilise this in the study of history. Games can enable different levels of historical understanding and thinking amongst diverse participants in a way other mediums simply cannot. So imagine if a non-academic person, perhaps one of you, could learn about the life of a historical figure by walking in an approximation of their shoes, and what a powerful understanding of history this would create. Imagine instead of just learning the dry facts and figures, you were embedded in the moment of their creation. Of course, not every game nor every type of history will suit this approach, and in any case, imparting historical understanding may never be the aim of a developer, even if, like Civilization, it's kind of the result. The nature of video games does also throw up some immediate problems. Video games are specifically designed to entertain, and to achieve this, one isn't surprised when historical elements are left by the wayside. Just look at Assassin's Creed, as mentioned, and almost every historical figure they've presented in their many numerous games. Although great care has been taken to actually recreate some of the history presented, and indeed a lot of the architecture, the very presence of a player character undermines this. Even the origins and concepts behind the Templar and the Assassin's Orders quickly become vastly inaccurate and convoluted. Having said that, I haven't played Assassin's Creed Origins. That may clear some of it up. I don't think so, but it may. And much of the promotion around that particular game does centre on this idea that by playing it, you can learn about the history of ancient Egypt, as kind of exemplified by their discovery mode. Again, whether that's true or not does remain to be seen. But I digress. A disclaimer does sit at the beginning of each of the Assassin's Creed games. The development team very clearly points out that their games are inspired by historical events and characters. So in this way, there's already this inbuilt idea that while historical thought and evidence and knowledge is present, it's not always intended to be accurate. It is important at this point for me to stress that I don't seek to presume that games can present a measure of historical truth, as troublesome as that is, or even that they should. But rather, they do provide an unheard of opportunity for the public to interact with and experience these moments in history from a personal point of view. Games like Assassin's Creed can inspire an interest in history, and this is just as important as learning historical facts. So one of the games I've looked at in my own research is actually also a Ubisoft game, although developed by their Montpellier kind of branch, and it's vastly, vastly different. It's Valiant Hearts, The Great War. So this is the E3 trailer, and it gives a very particular type of history, as you'll see.
To my dearest friends, through the evil noise of artillery, tanks, and planes, I remember our adventures, your friendship, and your pain. My closest friend, Emile, in your twilight years, you came to fight. Not for glory, but to mend your daughter's tears. Lucky Freddy, you were always fearless and with intent. I hope you have found peace with your letters that were never sent. Anna, my bravest of warriors across the Western Front, saving the mountain of wounded without firing a shot. And Carl, if only I could light your way home through the fields of war, through treacherous nights, to be with your family once more. Although I cannot write these words, and the time has come to part, your stories will always remain, as will your valiant hearts.
Valiant Hearts is billed as this highly emotive and very engaging game. It is a game that's been created specifically to impart historical knowledge, as evidenced by Ubisoft's work with Mission Sentinelle. I'm very bad at French. Almost as bad as I am at German. Who specifically aim to offer a way for the public to understand World War I. That particular organisation is a French organisation designed to work in conjunction with the French government to prepare and implement a commemoration program for the centenary of World War I. This game was released in 2014, so kind of is one of their first things they've done for that. So they work under the supervision of the Deputy Minister of War Veterans and aim to promote an understanding of World War I by supporting private and public remembrance in both France and abroad. And so a deliberate association with by the developers for this game is particularly telling about that game's intention. In addition, Valiant Hearts draws on historical sources from several international archive repositories, including our own Australian War Memorial, the Belgian Ministry for Defence, and the US Library of Congress. They very specifically desired to credit this archival and historical sources, both to inform players about the historical realities of World War I, but to make that apparent and give them a bit of an authenticity in that sense. And indeed, Valiant Hearts does weave a rich tapestry of sacrifice and courage set against the complexities of World War I. As you can see from the trailer and even from that still shot, the game is very cartoony. It's almost childlike. And although there are explosions and deaths and dead bodies, you never see any blood. The gameplay is largely just point and click, and it does have a multitude of cutscenes, and so there is a heavy emphasis on the storyline and the historical events being presented. You do literally get to play as Walter the dog at several points, and so it can't really be argued that Valiant Hearts is seeking to present historical truth. However, littered throughout the game is the opportunity to access historical facts about the conflicts, as well as to read some of the letters it was based on and the diary entries of real-life soldiers. In addition to this, Valiant Hearts is designed to allow the player to access multiple types of characters in order to best represent the diversity of experiences during World War I. Even in regards to the characters who do become soldiers, and not all of them do, you don't just control them on the battlefield. So the aim is to represent this idea that a person's experience of war isn't just two-dimensional, it's not just about fighting, but it does vary greatly. Valiant Hearts asks the player to invest in the motivations of the characters, the common theme being a desire to reunite with family. So kind of as the trailer talked about, there are 4 distinct human characters. Emile is a French farmer turned soldier who's trying to live through the war so he can see his daughter and grandson again. There's also Karl, who's actually Emile's son-in-law, who's German and is separated from his family at the beginning of the game. Freddie, an American fighting with the French Foreign Legion, who's seeking revenge for the death of his wife. And Anna, a Belgian nurse turned battlefield medic, who's actually searching for a kidnapped father. It turns out he's been kidnapped by the same person who killed Freddie's wife. I know, he drives a Zeppelin. It's very contrived. But of course, there's also Walter the dog, who's separated from his owner at the beginning of the game. You do actually eventually reunite him with his owner. There's also a interactive comic based on Walter's story specifically. So although contrived, these overarching narratives do allow Valiant Hearts to explore multifaceted themes surrounding race and nationhood, the treatment of POWs, the moral implications of warfare, and the effect of unethical battle tactics. And notably, and as you probably guessed, Valiant Hearts allows you to play on both sides of the conflict. So you do, in the same battle, play as both Emile on the French side and Karl on the German side. And really it serves to emphasize the normality of these people caught in the crossfire of global politics. Each character does have their own set of skills and experiences different parts of the war. And quite a surprising amount of care has been taken to not only present the battles in chronological order, but also to introduce period-appropriate technology as it develops. And of course, the game is deeply emotive. People buy into the stories of these characters, and the outrage and the grief and the fear that they feel becomes, in a lot of ways, your own. This builds up to the ending of the game where, and I am going to spoil the final bit, so if anyone wants to, yeah, good. Cover your ears. I'll wave when we're done. Emile is actually executed by a French firing squad after being court-martialed. He accidentally kills his commanding officer. So this event occurs during a battle where his officer refuses to stop sending men to their deaths through the trenches, despite watching 3 soldiers kind of go in a row and get shot down. Emile picks up a shovel, this kind of shovel that he's been carrying since the beginning of the game. You solve a lot of puzzles with it, and he hits his officer over the head with it. It's very clear that he doesn't mean to kill him, but that's what happens, and he is forced to face the consequences of this despite his noble intent to essentially prevent the death of other soldiers. It's probably cool. The ending was genuinely heart-wrenching. It literally had me in absolute tears. I could barely watch it. And it kind of, that alone makes this game worth playing. I've spent a lot of my secondary and tertiary education learning about World War I. But before this game, I've never really felt that kind of response to a person's experience of war. It kind of was the only thing that's really put me in the place of a soldier and of someone who's really just trying to survive. And by experiencing this personal side of war, players are able to walk away with a better understanding of the human impacts and kind of a possible experience of war, of the devastation war can kind of wreak. So although it cannot be said that all games are appropriate for historical study, scholars should be interested in the ways that people engage with them and how they can learn from them. Perhaps this kind of can't apply to things like first-person shooters as much, in my opinion. Having said that, video games still remain a valuable way to transmit historical knowledge, and we do have much to learn about this. Further research should, and hopefully will, PhD, be conducted in this area, especially kind of when you consider people who are turned off history can still engage with these historical games and engage with them so enthusiastically. And ultimately, it's important that we do engage with history and gaming in a meaningful way rather than kind of just dismiss it. Thank you.